Part 128. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1271. The immortal is so complimentary. Hearing Zuyun's praise, the sword immortal officer hurriedly stepped forward, fearful and frightened. Zuyun understood a little bit, laughed, and said, "Let's go, let's talk as we walk. It's our first time coming to this border town, it has a different flavor." Immortal official Xian said quickly, "I am really flattered by the Immortals' evaluation of Duxian town like this. Immortal, I am the master of this town. My name is Shan Peng, and I am the Fan Immortal root. That is Shan Hao, my younger brother, but he is the Shangu Immortal root." Zuyun was already familiar with strange things. In the spiritual world, there are also monks who use fans or fan bones as their natal spiritual weapons. He just needs to understand it like that, so he smiled and nodded and said, "Not bad." While walking and talking, Zuyun also got to know a little about these people, and even more about Duxian town. From the mouths of these people, we can know that this Jingping fairyland is vast and has countless small towns. It is said to be a small town, but in fact it is more like a slightly larger village, except that more immortal people survive. Every village has a fairy light magic circle to protect the village from being invaded by monsters. This immortal light array is maintained by immortal officials, and maintenance requires an item called purple light stone. But they could not obtain the purple light stone, so they could only exchange it by handing in the smoke soul powder and the fairy envoy sent by the fairy kingdom. And Zuyun also knew the reason why they were so respectful. It was because in recent days, there had been very few smoke souls in Duxian town. The purple light stone they exchanged might not be able to withstand the next monster invasion. The purpose was obvious. This is because they want to keep Zuyun as their foreign aid to deal with the beast tide. I almost understand what you are saying. The immortal kingdom is so big, so I just wanted to go out and have a look. I went out to see, and I stayed in Duxian town to see. If there is really a tide of beasts coming, I will provide support. That's right. When Zuyun finished a cup of fairy tea and said these words, the entire government almost boiled. The mayor of Duxian town is the person in charge here. He is an immortal with a slightly stronger momentum than Zuyun, but unfortunately, his immortal root is the Pen immortal root. In his words, he is a master of calligraphy, but his power in immortality is extremely weak. Although Duxian town is running well, there is nothing he can do about it. He can only be regarded as a below-average immortal. Zuyun had some realization. If he had the immortal pen root, he didn't know what effect the talisman would have. But he didn't say it directly, he planned to wait and see before talking. Zuyun became a guest, and these immortal officials came to greet him every day and asked him what he needed. They even took out some rare things, animal bones. This made Zuyun couldn't help but wonder, if animal bones are so precious, why not kill more during the beast tide? Or, when there is no beast tide, collect more from those bone pickers. But he never asked these questions. Instead, he asked them casually, what kind of beast did this animal bone belong to, and what part of that animal bone was it? The person who donated the bones thought that the treasure he presented had caught Zuyun's eyes. Not only did he introduce the origin of the animal bones, but he also flattered the monsters by telling them about their appearance and habits. But the more monsters he knew about, the more shocked Zuyun was. After reaching 12 types, there are no new types of animal bones. Rat, ox, tiger and rabbit, dragon, snake, horse and sheep, monkey, rooster, dog, and pig. It is these 12 tribes of destiny. Zuyun once pretended to be angry and said, "Are there any bones other than these monster beasts?" Everyone was trembling with fear. When it came to the bones of monsters, they in Duxian town had no ability to pick them up. This made Zuyun want to know something more, which was Warcraft. Zuyun had heard of the word Warcraft when he was in the mortal world. In the Juyo land of Yasha realm, the demonic cultivators there would call some monsters that jumped over from the spiritual world and were attacked by the demonic energy as warcraft. But obviously, the magical beasts mentioned by these immortal officials are not the same kind. This Jingping immortal kingdom seems to be more complicated than I imagined. Zuyun secretly remembered it in his heart. After a few days, the mayor suddenly looked solemn and found Zuyun. Blessings to the immortal, an immortal detective has discovered traces of rat demons. It may be that a tide of beasts is coming. Should we take the initiative and kill some of them first if we have the chance? When he said this, the mayor was filled with expectations. Zuyun thought for a moment. After eating and drinking for so long, it was time to help them. Of course, the more important purpose was to see if the sword demon was exactly the same as the rat demon in Dongsheng realm. Okay, let's go and take a look. If this rat demon is the leader of the beast wave, it doesn't matter if we kill some first. He waved proudly and then stood up. The mayor was overjoyed and summoned all the immortal officials in the government, saying that they would all obey Zuyun's orders. There were more than 30 people, and the aura of each of them was no weaker than that of Zuyun, but the eyes looking at Zuyun were filled with incomparable admiration. Zuyun knew that they must think that their immortal roots were of the highest quality. Just like in the mortal world, multiple spiritual roots looked up to single spiritual roots and mutated spiritual roots. Set off. The mayor became Zuyun's messenger, and they rushed out of the town. Along the way, he was surrounded by immortals on both sides. There are ordinary people and there are immortal people who know magic. They walked across the street, cheering or applauding. When he arrived at the entrance of the town, Zuyun discovered that there was a semi-transparent curtain of golden light, which was still the familiar golden color. He quietly used the void-breaking spiritual eyes technique, but was surprised to find that the void-breaking spiritual eyes technique had a miraculous effect. It was as if he had used the divine eye technique. But the consumption of the divine eye technique was extremely high. Even if he tried his best, he could only hold on for a few breaths. He saw golden formations appearing in front of his eyes. The golden light flowed and the golden power circulated continuously. He once suspected that this golden power was immortal power. But he also thought that his chaos power was also immortal power. This gray color and gold don't go together at all. As if passing through a curtain of water, Zuyun suddenly felt that the temperature around him had become much higher. He stopped and looked back. A huge golden light shield was seen, covering not only the entire Duxian town, but also reaching the top of the mountain range. No wonder he hadn't noticed the formation before. It turned out that the formation was big enough. I wish you the best, Immortal. When the beast tide comes, we can only move the crowd as close to the government as possible. This can also reduce the consumption of purple light stones and last longer. The mayor said somewhat helplessly. At this time, Shanpeng came running from a distance, followed by a woman with extremely long legs. Xianxia, this is our spy from Duxian town, Xuesiyan. She is a leg fairy, nicknamed Big Long Legs. Zuyun's eyes flashed. The immortal roots here were really unbelievable, but he still nodded with a smile and said, Xue Immortal, where are those rat demons now and how many are there? Blessings to the immortal, Xuesiyan, although she was a female cultivator, had a resolute look on her face and said with her fists clasped, those rat demons started digging caves 30 miles outside the town. The purpose is to hide and gather first. Finally, attack our purple light defense array with all your strength. Judging from the current number, there are at least 1,000 of them, each with a cultivation level of 3,000 years. It seems that the Rat Demon King is going to take action this time. There is actually a Rat Demon King? Zuyun had fought with the rat demons in Dongsheng realm and knew their ability to dig holes. After knowing a little bit about them, he asked, do you have narcissus roots and fire fairy roots? The mayor smiled bitterly and said, Zhu Xianxi, how can we have these immortals with spiritual immortal roots in our Duxian town? If there were, we wouldn't be so worried. Spiritual fairy root. It turns out there is a collective name. Zuyun also wrote it down, thought about it, and then said, if it is an immortal without spiritual roots, I am afraid that he can only deal with it with force. I wish you, immortal, to rest assured. Among the many immortal officials present, except for me and Shui immortal official, the rest of them do not have immortal roots that exceed the lower grade, but they are all immortal roots used in battles. The rat demon is very clever. If he accepts the challenge, he may be at a disadvantage. And there are so many of them, the only advantage we have is through surprise. Zuyun's words made all the immortals feel distressed. Yes, their immortal roots are not strong, and their number of partial births is also small. However, this matter is not impossible to deal with. Since they can dig holes, we will dig trenches. Is there anyone who can hoe or shovel fairy roots? Two strange immortals stood up immediately. They did not speak, but stretched out their right hands, and the shadows of hoes and shovels were condensed in their palms. In this way, we will go forward 10 miles, dig a trench horizontally, and then the other immortals will ambush. Since those rat demons are digging holes, if they keep digging this way, they will definitely emerge in the trench. When you raise your head, you will be stabbed. The mayor frowned at first, but after thinking about it carefully, he couldn't help but be overjoyed. Feasible. No matter how many rat demons there are, the one who digs the first hole will definitely be a rat. Unless these rat demons dig 1,000 holes and rush out at the same time, they still have an absolute chance. I can fan the immortal root and cut it. Shanpeng stood up and said in a deep voice. Shanhao was not weak at all, and said, I can also assassinate the rat demon with my fan bone. The other immortal officials also pressed their own immortal roots and divided into two groups. One group dug trenches and the other group was responsible for killing. Under this arrangement, in addition to Xuesiyan and the mayor, there was also the immortal official with the shield's immortal roots, standing beside Zuyun. Xuesiyan, if you encounter danger, you will take immortal Zhu and escape back to the town. Do you remember? The mayor's order surprised Zuyun, and he couldn't help but ask, why did the mayor do this? Zhu has the ability to escape from here. But on the other hand, all the immortal officials are fighting on the front line, how can Zhu the reason for escaping from battle? The mayor looked sadly at the people who were busy in the distance, and said, I am a literary immortal who has no way to deal with this chaos of monsters. Instead of letting Zhu Xianxia fight hard here, it is better to let Zhu Xianxia guarding one side of the town. It's not scary if I die. What's scary is that if Duxian town is leaderless, then all the immortals will be dead. Zuyun looked at the mayor in surprise, with mixed feelings in his heart. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1272. The mayor calls himself literary immortal, and Zuyun can probably understand the meaning. It means that he uses the pen as the root of immortality, and all his magic is in the pen. Naturally, his combat power is not as good as the other immortal officials. Moreover, I am not very optimistic about what will happen next. But it was clear that the rat demon had not taken any action yet. This shows that he has a heartfelt fear of these monsters. Zuyun shook his head and said, Mayor, please don't belittle yourself. We can still take a look at the situation. What if there will be a surprise when the trench is dug? The mayor cast a grateful look at Zuyun, thinking that Zuyun was trying to boost everyone's morale. Wish immortal, generally speaking, the beast tide will be a combination of at least two kinds of monsters. It is true that this trench has a targeted effect on rat monsters, but what about other monsters? If it is a rabbit monster, it is not bad. But if it's a large monster, not to mention a cow or a sheep, but a tiger or a cow, I'm afraid it will be difficult to deal with it. Zuyun didn't know why the mayor was so pessimistic, so he shook his head again and said, Mayor, Let's take a look at the situation first. If we can really resist it, we will try our best to save our lives even if we are destined to live in peace. The Green Mountains are here, so you don't have to worry about running out of firewood, don't you think? I wish the immortal was right and I have learned a lesson. Seeing that Zuyun was still encouraging him, the mayor's eyes were even more grateful. He couldn't continue to express his frustration, so he raised his hand to Zuyun. Zuyun was slightly satisfied, and then said, "What is the mayor good at?" "Sometimes when dealing with monsters, we have to use our brains more than brute force." After these exchanges, he also learned that the mayor was kind-hearted and was thinking about Duxian Town, which made him have some changes in Qingping Fairy Kingdom. Not everyone is like that old man. Poor mountains and rivers bring out unruly people, and maybe the old herb collector was just forced by the world. The Qingping Fairy Kingdom opens once every 1,000 years, and it is indeed not easy to live hard for 1,000 years just to survive. Zuyun is not trying to excuse them, but is always used to thinking about the essence of things. The essence of the old man harming him remains unchanged. No matter how poor he is, if he wants to harm him, Zuyun will never let it go. It's just that at that time, even now, he didn't fully understand the Qingping Immortal Kingdom, so he didn't take action rashly. He also slightly changed his attitude towards the mayor at this time. But there is still a question, that is, if monsters are so terrifying, why does the profession of bone picker still exist? Thinking about it from another perspective, does the beast tide mean a huge opportunity? I wish you immortality, the old man's magic is just relying on the level of the immortal root to suppress it. It has some effect on us immortals. The rest is not as good as other people's fighting immortal roots. Zuyun was stunned by the mayor's words. Can the level of immortal roots be suppressed? These days, he has ignored the immortal roots and regarded them as spiritual roots. But when I heard it, I couldn't help but cheer up again. He was not sure whether he could return to the spirit world along the original path. If not, he would need to visit the Qingping Fairy Kingdom, and he would inevitably have to deal with other immortals. And this immortal root is unique to Qingping Immortal Kingdom. Immortal roots are divided into 3 categories, upper, middle and lower. It is said that there are top-level immortal roots in the capital. Zuyun also smiled and didn't care about this. Single spiritual roots or mutated spiritual roots are praised by thousands of people in the mortal world, but who knows that 5 spiritual roots combined with the 5 elements of Chaos Sutra are the best. The strongest existence. There are no waste spiritual roots, no waste techniques, only waste people. He thought that the same was true for Qingping Immortal Kingdom, but he didn't expect that this place would subvert his understanding. Zuyun thought for a while and then said, "Mayor, you can study the appropriate immortal method. It is reasonable if it exists. Is it possible to deal with it just because it exists?" The mayor chewed these 5 words carefully, and then smiled bitterly and said, "Zhu Xianxia, how can it be so easy to study the magic of immortality? If the old man had such ability, he would not be assigned to be the mayor of Duxian Town. It will last for 10,000 years. 10,000 years? Zuyun was shocked. In the spiritual world, it would take 10,000 years to cultivate to the stage of transcending tribulation and prepare to ascend. This Qingping Fairy Kingdom seems to be no good either. However, judging from the attitude of the old mayor, it is not difficult to guess that precisely because of their long lifespan, they may have lost the motivation to compete with the sky. This makes them inferior compared to the yellow stars. Just when he was thinking about how to respond to the mayor's words, there was a subtle vibration on the ground. He was shuddered and quickly looked over the ditch. Just then, a huge black rat demon, as big as his body, opened the hole and exposed his sharp mouth. Perhaps because he didn't expect to see the light suddenly, the rat demon was slightly stunned. But a flash of sword light struck the trench wall and cut off his entire pointed beak. The aura of demon blood instantly filled the air, and rat heads also appeared in other locations. For a moment, there were flashes of swords and shadows, and every war immortal official moved their immortal roots one after another. The golden shadows flashed continuously, making the trench shine like a golden wall. As the gopher demons emerged one after another, half of the corpses were pushed out by the rat demons that followed. The rat demon corpses in the trench soon reached the ankles of the war immortals. In some places, the rat demon rushed out faster, and even cut off half of its body, letting out a squeaking roar of pain. But there are too many rat demons. More than 1,000 in total. Zuyun didn't know how big these rat demons were, he only knew that they had 3,000 years of Taoism. I thought 3,000 years was a long time, but I didn't expect the mayor to live for 10,000 years. Zuyun's face was a little grim. It seemed that they had no casualties, and each immortal official was like a man blocking the pass, but when the corpses were higher than their waists, Zuyun ordered them to retreat immediately. Shan Peng chopped off half of his head, sprayed blood all over his face, his eyes were fierce, and he said without looking back, "Immortal Zhu, we are killing happily, why are you retreating?" "Yes, Immortal Zhu," Shan Hao, who was not far from him, also said, "Immortal Zhu, in this short time, we have killed almost 500 demon rats, and only half are left." Zuyun's face darkened a bit, but he was not angry. If there were only this wave of demon rats, it would not matter if they continued to stay there, but the mayor said that there would be at least 2 kinds of demon beasts in each beast tide. If the 2 waves of demon beasts attacked without stopping in the middle, then they would not be able to get out. The size of the demon rat caused a situation he had not expected, which would become uncontrollable as the situation developed. Although the trench was wide, 1,000 demon beasts would certainly drag them into the trench. "You agreed to follow the command of this immortal, why don't you retreat immediately?" Zuyun's words became sharper, and his tone was deeper, with no doubt. "Immortal Zhu, you are not an immortal from Duxian town, and you don't have our experience in dealing with these beast tides." The immortal official who used to use the shield was responsible for resisting in the past, but today he was able to smash with the shield and killed many. When had he ever had such a happy killing? He turned around and responded. As soon as the voice fell, the ground shook violently. Moo! A huge beast roar came from a distance. "It's a demon bull." The mayor's face changed, and these immortals who were slaughtering unilaterally also woke up from the killing. "Go, go!" Shan Peng panicked and roared heartbreakingly. The rest of the immortals had no time to deal with the demon rats that came out of the mud. They all wanted to leave the trench, but the corpses of the demon rats pressed them down. How could it be so easy? Suddenly, a demon rat came out of the cave, its eyes full of red light, and bit a fairy's throat like a tiger pouncing on its food. It was the shield fairy officer. Blood gushed out like a spring, and he couldn't even scream, let alone use the shield fairy root to create a shield shadow for protection. The strong smell of blood filled everyone's nose, and stimulated these rat demons. The rat demons were like giant sharks in the deep sea, and surrounded him in the blink of an eye. Because of this, Shan Peng and others also had a chance to escape. They struggled to climb out of the trench filled with demon rat corpses, blocking Zuyun and others, forming a line of defense. But no one was happy, and there was a trace of sadness in their eyes. Another comrade died. Zuyun didn't blame him, because it was not suitable at this time. But they also knew that these people would obey them next. There is no doubt that the bull demons will come behind. From the sound, they are rushing in groups. Zuyun clenched his fists. The rat demons were still crazy because of the human blood and had not rushed towards them yet. Zhu Xianxia, dig trenches," the mayor said tremblingly. This was one of their previous plans. People have died before. But today, when he was in the upper hand, someone suddenly died, and the death was so close. How could he not panic? "I can't dig for the time being," Zuyun shook his head, his eyes stern, retreat over there. Digging trenches is not a wise move. The reason why their trenches have achieved such an effect is that they have seized the initiative. But the rat demons will attack them after they have finished snatching the food from the shield fairy official. So digging trenches is more like digging their own graves. That? Aren't you going back to the town? At least the purple smokestone in the town can still hold out for a while. You also said that it can only hold out for a while. Instead of waiting to die, it's better to fight. Zuyun saw it clearly, and he also had experience in the beast tide in the mortal world. One monster is not scary, but a group of monsters, especially the strength and size of the monster bull, he didn't trust that the formation of Duxian town could withstand it. He had seen through the whole picture of the rat monster, and there was not much difference between it and the rat monsters of the 12 major monster tribes, so the bull monster should be the same. He had been to the ancestral land of the bull tribe, and they were all monster cultivators with great strength but no brains. I think this is the point that can be broken through. Everyone, hurry up. Zuyun waved his hand and stepped out of the longevity tactic. The other immortal officials behind him hurriedly followed, and Xuexian, with long legs, actually carried the mayor directly and followed closely behind. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1273. Zuyun actually didn't know where to go. For him, since he couldn't go to Duxian town, there were only two directions, left and right. The secret of immortality is boundless, and if you run with all your strength, your speed will not be slow. Especially after he used a trace of chaos power, it was difficult for these immortal officials to catch up, so Xuesiren could keep a certain distance from him. Fortunately, Zuyun ran in a straight line, and the immortal officials only needed to keep moving in this direction. The shaking on the ground became more and more intense, indicating that the tide of demonic cows and beasts was also beginning to chase them. Those rat demons chewed up the shield immortal official until not even a drop of blood was left. Hundreds of rat demons are also chasing this way. Xuexian's eyes were shining. Although she was still carrying the mayor on her body, it did not affect her speed at all. She kept staring at Zuyun's legs. Xianxi's immortal method is so mysterious. Could it be that he also has immortal legs? The double immortal roots are not useless, but the problem is that immortal Zhu's legs don't have long legs either. If Zuyun knew that Xuexian thought so, he would definitely be dumbfounded. At this time, the mayor on her shoulder suddenly said in shock, I can't run anymore, I can't run anymore, if I keep running, I will reach the Duanxian River. Break the immortal river. Xuexian suddenly came back to his senses and said, Mayor, I can't catch up with Immortal Zhu with you. If I stop, I can only catch up with Immortal Zhu by putting you down, and then notify him. Don't worry about me. The mayor jumped off Xuexian's shoulders without hesitation and said, if Immortal Zhu enters the Duanxian River, our Duxian town will be hopeless. Xuexian also knew the seriousness of the consequences. When the rat demon appeared, she kept watching and saw that Zuyun's decisiveness on the spot was extremely powerful, and he might really be the savior of their Duxian town. No longer having to carry the mayor on his back, Xuexian moved a little faster, approaching Zuyun at a speed visible to the naked eye. That erratic figure, with golden light shining under its feet, seemed to be moving without moving, but within a moment, it had caught up with Zuyun. Bless the immortal, wish the immortal, don't run away anymore. Xuexian's voice woke up Zuyun, who was a little sluggish. Although he did not use all his strength to use the immortality art, he could still be in the stage of divine transformation, and it would be difficult for people in the same situation to catch up. He knew that Xuexian could become a spy in Duxian town because of her leg spirit. Zuyun also expressed his understanding, but why? She was obviously a little far away, how could she catch up with her all of a sudden? Zuyun could hear Xuesiyan's footsteps before. How many breaths had passed until Xuesiyan reached this point before the footsteps disappeared? Fortunately, this loss of consciousness lasted only a moment, and Zuyun stopped. Where's the mayor? After asking Gai Wen, he still looked along the way. The mayor got up from the ground with a dusty face. Looking at his movements, it seemed that he had been thrown down by Xuesiyan while running at high speed. Ahead is the Duanxian River. The mayor said that if you run down, you will be in danger. Broken the Immortal River? As soon as you hear this name, you will be in danger, but if you don't run away, the rat demons behind will be easy to deal with, but what about the cow demons? Immortal Zhu is from another place and doesn't know much about the Duanxian River. The Duanxian River is very strange. As long as it is touched by the river water, the immortal roots will be affected. Xuesiyan's words made Zuyun's heart move. Does that have any effect on the monsters? There shouldn't be any monsters, Xuesiyan said. This river only cuts off immortals, not monsters. Zuyun's brows furrowed, and at this moment, the immortal officials who were following him also helped the mayor up and followed him. Wish you, immortal, it's dangerous to break the immortal river. Why don't we change the direction and run again? The immortal officials thought that Zuyun was leading them to run away, so they said this. But if he stops like this, the rat demon will catch up within half a cup of tea at most. He pondered for a moment and said, how dangerous is it? Since they reminded themselves, they could ask why the immortal river was broken and see if there was any way. If these monsters are not dealt with, he will not be able to return to Duxian town. After being contaminated by the water of the Duanxian River, there will be an inexplicable force in the river, infiltrating the body, and finally invading the immortal roots. If the immortal roots are not there, then they are not even immortals, and Xiaoyuan will become like a mortal. If you have lived for more than 100 years, your body will die immediately. If you have not lived for 100 years, your appearance will also grow old. There is such magical water? Zuyun didn't think too much and asked again, except for us, can we use vessels to hold water? What does Zhu Xianxi mean? They have a natural fear of the broken immortal river, so how can they have other ideas, let alone what Zuyun said about using things to hold water? That should be possible, right? Xuesiyan said, I once saw a monster drinking water from the Duanxian River, which means that the Duanxian River only affects the immortal roots. That's good, Zuyun thought for a moment and said, let's go to Duanxian River first, and then I'll stay where I am, and you can stay away from me along the river bank. You can't, Zhu Xianxi, the mayor was shocked. He couldn't tell that Zuyun wanted to deal with it alone. This was his entire Duxian town's business. How could Zuyun be responsible for it alone? To put it bluntly, even if Zuyun abandoned them and left, they wouldn't have any thoughts? Why not? Zuyun raised his eyebrows, squinted his eyes, and said, either, I will find a way to leave at this time. Or, just do as I say. This. Everyone was in trouble, but Xuesiyan said, Mayor, fellow immortal officials, Immortal Zhu ran so fast just now, and Xue couldn't catch up. If we stay, we will die. And Immortal Zhu even beats him, but those rat demons and bull demons can escape and ascend to heaven. Zuyun smiled slightly and said, yes, that's exactly it. Looking back, I could already see several rat demons running fast. They were as big as a man. Although their limbs were short, they were connected together like black shadows. Then let's go to Duangxianhe first. The mayor gave the order, and the immortal officials gathered their energy and ran wildly. Zuyun took the initiative to fall behind, and then he discovered an interesting scene. These immortal warriors are using what they call their immortal power. Not only are their feet shining with golden light, but their respective immortal roots are looming as they run. If you don't look carefully, you can't see it. The shadows were both visible and hidden. The mayor's was the least conspicuous, but Xianxia did not appear at all. I guess it's also a characteristic of immortal roots, right? Zuyun thought like this, seeing that everyone was running hard and no one was paying attention to him. He looked back, quietly stretched out his finger as a pen, and drew a heaven-gathering thunder talisman. These monsters are very evil. Although they look the same as the rat monsters in Dongsheng realm, they are much more violent. They seem to have lost their minds for flesh and blood. Since it's evil, let's try it with the thunder. The spiritual talisman took shape and turned into an arc of electricity that shot towards the sky. In an instant, there was an inconspicuous muffled sound in the sky, and then a thunderbolt as thick as an arm fell down. This thunder-gathering talisman was originally an intermediate talisman, and it was of no use to Zuyun at this time. But because it is drawn in the form of a spiritual talisman, it can improve the grade of the original talisman. In addition, there seems to be something unusual about this Jingping fairy kingdom. This lightning suddenly hit a monster and blew it to death. Huh. Zuyun also didn't expect that the heaven-gathering thunder talisman would have such a wonderful effect, and he was immediately surprised. Realizing that the immortal officials in front of him had not noticed him, he suddenly stopped while running and drew another picture. Zhyla. The thunder pillar reappeared, falling from the sky, and hit another rat demon. But this time, the rat demon seemed to have discovered something, and he dodged dexterously. He was not hit directly, but he was also slightly affected. The hind limbs were instantly blackened, and the rat demon fell violently. Zuyun watched and retreated. He originally thought that the rat demon would give up and find a way to heal his injuries on the spot. However, he did not expect that it was actually struggling with its legs, and the fierce light in its eyes was even more fierce as it chased towards this place. No, these monsters seemed to have lost their minds. At this moment, Zhu Yunfan suddenly woke up. They must be under some kind of control. Looking at the rat demon's lost hind legs after running, without noticing any pain, Zuyun couldn't help but think of the first time he used the sky-gathering thunder talisman to deal with the beast tide. That was the first time something happened to the demon refining tower. The heaven-gathering thunder talisman was crushed by him, and thousands of thunder pillars descended from the sky. Finally, he escaped from the overwhelming bird demon. There is a momentary similarity between this situation and this scene. But later, the Jushin thunder talisman seemed to be less effective, and Zuyun never paid attention to it, thinking that it was related to the intermediate talisman. Even though the sky thunder talisman restrained these monsters, it was also limited by the power level. They are still here, I can't act rashly, wait until they leave along the Duanxian River, I will try again. He has determined that these rat demons no longer pose any danger to him, and there are not many of them. Since the sky-gathering thunder talisman can kill them with one blow, there is nothing to worry about. Only the bull demon in the back. The tremors on the ground were slowly getting stronger, indicating that the bull demon was in hot pursuit. Zuyun secretly has a plan in his heart, but he can only wait until Duanxian River. After coming up with a plan, Zuyun also injected a little more chaos power into his legs, his speed suddenly increased, and he followed closely behind the immortal officials. A stick of incense passed by, and a large river with 9 curves fell into sight. The surface of the river is calm, but the water is extremely turbid. Wish immortal, we will go up the river, but we won't just run away and wait for news from you 10 miles away. Xianxia didn't know when he picked up the mayor again and yelled at Zuyun. The dozen or so people said goodbye to Zuyun one after another. Zuyun did not speak, but nodded. When he saw that they no longer looked at him, they ran downstream along the river. It wasn't until he was out of sight that he suddenly stopped and stretched out his hands. Gathering Thunder Talisman. Stretching your finger into a pen, 2 talismans were formed at the same time. Call out. Call out. The thunder pillar fell from the sky and hit a rat demon at the same time. In an instant, the rat demon was blasted into burnt black powder. But the rest of the rat demons were not intimidated at all and ran towards Zhu Yun one after another, which further confirmed Zhu Yun's suspicion. Humph, let's kill you first, and then find a way to deal with the bull demon. Zhu Yun's hands danced rapidly. He was familiar with the sky-gathering thunder talisman. He didn't need to think about how to draw it at all. With just one thought, he could draw the double talisman in one breath. Boom! Boom! As soon as the thunder pillar fell, there were two. There was a roar, and a rat demon turned into black-gray. However, he still needs to fight and retreat to avoid being trapped by the rat demon on the edge of the Duanxian River. But what Zhu Yun didn't expect was that a sleeping giant beast in the seemingly peaceful Duanxian River was awakened by the roar of thunder pillars. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1274. The seemingly calm broken immortal river was filled with yellow sand due to the thunder, and it was impossible to see how big the giant beast was. But if you go deep into the riverbed, you will definitely see a pair of huge eyes with bloodthirsty anger. On the river bank, Zhu Yun drew the sky thunder talisman with both hands, like a butterfly flying through flowers. This talisman consumes very little of his spiritual power, but it can produce such a great effect. Why not transform it? The rat monsters are agile and fast. As long as they are killed, they can concentrate on dealing with the bull monsters that will come later. But the giant beast has slowly floated towards the surface of the river, but Zhu Yun is still unaware of it, and even forgot the fear reaction of the immortal officials to the 3 words broken immortal river. When the rat monsters all turned into charred powder and flew away with the wind, the bull monster appeared in Zhu Yun's sight, madly spreading its forehooves and breathing angrily. Here it comes. Zhu Yun's eyebrows shrank. This time he no longer used both hands to draw the talisman, but only used his right hand to draw a sky-gathering thunder talisman. The thunder column fell down and hit the leading bull demon. Moo! The black bull roared in pain, but it was not damaged. Zhu Yun was shocked. The sky-gathering thunder talisman was ineffective. However, seeing that the bull demon's body stagnated and its speed suddenly dropped a lot, Zhu Yun also squinted his eyes and thought about something. No damage can be seen outside, maybe inside. The speed of the charging cattle was affected by the leading cattle. This slowed down, and the following ones also slowed down. The scarlet eyes, like the rat demon, revealed a kind of weirdness. Zhu Yun took a few more steps back, and this time he chose to draw the talisman with both hands. Boom! Boom! 2 thunder columns fell, but this time, the leading cattle seemed to be prepared, raised its head, and actually greeted it with its horns. Sizzle! As thunder and lightning sounded, Zhu Yun suddenly opened his eyes wide. He clearly saw 2 lightning pillars, which actually led the sky thunder to the ground. This bull monster. This scene was a bit unbelievable, but Zhu Yun also knew that it was not the time to figure out the key. Without any hesitation, he turned around and ran away. Without anyone watching, he could use his Changshengju to his heart's content. If Xianxia was still here, he would definitely stare at him. The cattle saw Zhu Yun running away, and they mooed again, exerting their strength with their limbs, and suddenly jumped out, but it was not so easy to catch up with Zhu Yun. Humph, just in time to see what's so strange about this broken immortal river. Zhu Yun was thoughtful and remembered that Xianxia had said that he had seen monsters drinking water from this river. He looked back and made sure that these demon bulls could not chase him for the time being. He carefully controlled the Pakuling Jingju and looked into the river. But what he saw was a piece of yellow sand. He frowned slightly, and his mind was shocked. He turned to use the divine eye technique. The scene suddenly changed, and a huge body appeared in his eyes. The head was like a tiger, with a triangle on the top, and the body was like a swimming snake, but there were no scales, but countless black hairs, rippling with the water. The body was even bigger than the dragon demon king he had seen. How, there is such a giant beast? He was extremely shocked. If the Changshengju had not almost formed the instinct of his body, he might have stopped in shock. The giant beast seemed to have discovered Zhu Yun, and suddenly raised its head slightly. The huge eyes were shining with black divine light, like an abyss. Demon beast. In an instant, Zhu Yun's mind emerged with the word that the immortal official had mentioned to him. The demon beast tide was terrible, but when it came to the bones of the beast, it was just a valuable beast bone in their eyes. But when it came to the demon beast, they only had deep fear, which made Zhu Yun secretly remember it in his heart. At this moment, he encountered a demon beast hiding in the broken immortal river, which was so scary to talk about. So, was the destruction of the immortals caused by this demon beast? However, the problem of the broken immortal river appeared on the river water. Was it related to this demon beast? Zhu Yun didn't have time to think about it. At this moment, he just wanted to stay away from the broken immortal river as much as possible. The look in the demon beast's eyes made him feel endless crisis. But the cattle were chasing him closely, and there were so many of them. When they found Zhu Yun going along the river bank, they spontaneously dispersed, as if they wanted to surround Zhu Yun to death on the river bank. It seems that there is only one way to find another way. Zhu Yun's eyes narrowed, and spiritual power suddenly flowed between his hands. Thinking that he was already dozens of miles away from those immortal officials, he shouldn't hide it anymore. Leaving the fire and turning into a dragon. The chaotic force instantly turned into fire, and the fire column turned over, and immediately turned into 5 fire dragons, roaring towards the cattle. But the cattle showed no sign of stopping, and rushed towards the fire dragon. Boom! After the loud noise, the fire dragon collapsed, and some golden light appeared on the horns of these demon cattle, just like when the immortal officials used the immortal magic. Demon power? No, this is not demon power, this is exactly the same as the immortal power used by those immortal lights. Zhu Yun exclaimed, how is this possible? Humans and demons have different paths, but they have to go through the demon disaster and turn into humans before they can use the same spiritual power as humans. But are these demon saints? He could not feel any demon saint breath at all. All this was beyond his understanding, so the problem was obviously with this golden light. The fire spell doesn't work, then try the sword energy. Zhu Yun made a prompt decision, and while retreating, he quickly put 2 fingers together with both hands. There was no sword in his hand, but there was a sword in his heart. Sword energy. Released. Although there was no gold spiritual power, Zhu Yun still chose to drive it with thunder spiritual power. A huge and thick thunder snake suddenly appeared between his fingers, making a crackling sound. When he made a move, he quickly jumped towards the cattle. Moo. Perhaps feeling the influence of the 2 thunder spirit sword energies on them, the cattle roared almost at the same time, shaking the ground, and the water of the broken immortal river was also stirred up by the waves, and rushed towards the shore. Then, the cattle moved in unison, lowering their heads one after another, and moving forward with their horns. Zi La. The thunder spirit sword energy actually rushed through the horns of the cattle and soared into the sky without causing any damage. The thunder spirit sword energy was more like a thunder from the bottom up, rushing straight into the sky, and then disappeared. These cattle are not simple. Zhu Yun didn't know how many times he was shocked. The cattle seemed to have no magical powers, but every move was beyond his understanding of the cattle monster. But do you think that this is all I have? Zhu Yun's eyes suddenly focused. Since the fire spirit power and thunder spirit power are useless, then use the chaos power. The chaos fist is obviously not suitable, so use the chaos palm. In the Danshan, one of the 28 chaos lotus hearts suddenly glowed, and the chaos power was quickly drained at this moment. In Zhu Yun's hand, he also put his 5 fingers together and slapped it out while turning it. Chaos Palm. The Chaos Palm can kill enemies across levels and has a certain range. In his opinion, this bull monster is at most at the same level as him. Boom. This palm power covers a wide range. The bull monsters felt the power and stopped suddenly. The dust on the ground quickly rose and swallowed their bodies. But the chaos power in the palm will not stop like this, and it is not affected at all. I want to see if you can block my full strength attack. Chaos Palm can be said to be one of Zhu Yun's strongest means besides the 4 Divine Beast Fist. The palm power is indestructible. The ground shook again, and the broken immortal river surged again. The yellow sand broke away from the water and fell again, as if it was raining sand. The yellow sand fell to the ground, and the dust and smoke also dissipated. Zhu Yun saw that Chaos Palm finally took effect. The bull monsters in the front were blasted into blood slag, revealing the bones of the bulls. But looking back, the bull monsters in the back were not hurt at all. No. Zhu Yun stepped forward in the air, his figure was already in the air, and he raised his palm again. The previous attack killed more than 10 heads, which was nothing to the whole herd. It seems that these herds chose to sacrifice the front bulls to block the full power of Chaos Palm. Chaos Palm can work, but he can only use 24 palms. The chaos power in the other 4 chaos lotuses can only be used in the 4 divine beast fists. And these 4 punches, he intends to deal with the lurking demon beast in the river. So, he must kill the cattle within 24 punches. Along the river, dozens of miles away. The mayor and others were shocked. Zhu Yun made a lot of noise, so they naturally heard it. Zhu Xianxia must be a fairy from the capital, otherwise how could he be so strong? Shan Peng uttered a word, and Shan Hao nodded repeatedly, saying, there were also immortals who traveled here in previous years, but none of them were as strong as him. The mayor was thoughtful and did not respond. But Xuesiyan was straightforward and said, some people from outside the fairyland are also very strong. The mayor turned his head suddenly and shouted to Xuesiyan, Inspector Xue, don't mention people from the fairyland. Xuesiyan didn't know what made the mayor angry, and hurriedly lowered his head. Shan Peng smiled bitterly and said, Mayor, it's not a taboo to have foreigners from the fairyland. It's okay for Inspector Xue to say it. Immortal Zhu is from the capital of the fairyland. At the very least, he is a great immortal from the fiefdom of several great fairy kings. If anyone talks nonsense again, don't blame this mayor for being rude. While the mayor was speaking, a wolf hair brush as thick as an arm appeared in his hand. The tip of the brush fluttered in the wind, with a faint golden light. Inspector Xue. Seeing that everyone was shocked by his majesty, the mayor seemed very satisfied and turned to look at Xuesiyan. Immortal Zhu is a great benefactor of our Duxian town. No accidents can happen. This mayor orders you to stay within 5 miles of him. If there is any situation, save him. Even if your legs are broken. Xuesiyan also became serious and said, Xian accepts the order. After that, golden light appeared, and the pair of long legs turned into a beam of light. The next moment, Xuesiyan's figure disappeared. After a while, the mayor smiled bitterly, do you think I don't know that Zhu Xianxia is from the immortal country? But if Duxian town wants to save itself, it must not only rely on Zhu Xianxia, but also be on guard against the immortal country. Everyone was silent and stopped talking. Foreigners from the immortal country are a taboo topic. As the mayor of a town, how could he not know? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1275. Zhu Yun didn't know what was happening here, and he couldn't blame him. It can only be said that these immortal officials are very good at hiding things, and they have no murderous intentions towards Zhu Yun at all. At this time, he was more focused on how to deal with these bull demons. The chaos palm falling from the sky also had a miraculous effect. With the force of the palm, all the bull demons will either die or be injured. When he was about to use his second palm, he saw a figure flying towards him from a distance. The speed was so fast that even his expression changed. Xianxia. Half of his body was covered with golden light, condensed on his legs. Zuyun pondered for a moment, then quickly crossed the herd and flew towards that direction. Inspector Shui, this place is dangerous, there are giant beasts in the Duanxian River. Zuyun landed in front of Xianxia and stopped her. Zhu Xianxi, you said there is a giant beast in the river. Xianxia ran for dozens of miles without any disturbance in his breath, but he was frightened by the giant beast in the river. Yes, there are giant beasts in the river. Zuyun was very sure. Even he didn't dare to look directly at the deep eyes that seemed to swallow people up. The monster, it must be the monster, let's go. Xianxia didn't care too much. She took Zuyun's hand and walked back along the original road. She wanted to go back and tell the mayor that if the magical beast appeared, all life here would be devastated. This tide of monsters and beasts would not matter at all. Nothing happens. Inspector Shui, bull demon. I can't worry about that much anymore. Let's talk about it when we get back. After the words fell, Xianxia was covered with golden light. Zuyun even saw the golden light flowing in the air, all coming towards Xianxia. It turns out that she hasn't tried her best. Zuyun took a deep breath to calm down. It seems that these immortal officials all knew that they came from outside the immortal kingdom, but they just wanted something from themselves, so they hid it. The person I want to be afraid of is not myself, but the patrol envoy from the fairyland. Zuyun was silent and was pulled forward by Xianxia. But unexpectedly, Duanxian he would undergo a huge change at this time. The river began to surge, setting off a huge water column, like the silhouette of a giant beast, chasing them towards them. Wish you, immortal, be careful not to be contaminated by the river water. Xianxia shouted softly, and his speed suddenly increased. Zuyun was not aware of it and almost stumbled. He quickly tapped his feet a few times before he could steady himself. But a yellow water arrow landed exactly where he landed before. The river water turned black instantly, and the soil on the river bank seemed to be burned, with some green smoke coming out. This river fruit really has inexplicable power. Zuyun was frightened, and at the same time he looked highly at Xianxia. He didn't expect that even a detective running errands would hide his strength. But with a wry smile, he thought he was right. It was probably the mayor and others who had discovered the danger here, so they sent Xianxia to rescue him. However, they did not expect that the monsters in the river made them lose even the slightest will to resist. Shui was chasing after him, but Xianxia was faster. If they were to compare, Zuyun would have to teleport to avoid him. Although Zuyun's guest identity has been guessed, when he is not completely sure of the attitude of the immortal official in Duxian town towards him, he still has to have some reservations. He was pulled by Xianxia like this, and not long after, he saw the mayor and others. Their faces were full of worry, and when they saw their figures, their faces suddenly relaxed. Inspector Shui, congratulations to the immortal. Seeing that the bull demon was not chasing after them, everyone was smiling happily. But Xianxia shouted heartbreakingly, retreat quickly, there are monsters in the river. As soon as these words came out, everyone's expressions changed. When they looked again, they saw that the water column in the river had already chased here. The giant beast transformed by the river water had already made a pounce. It was obvious that it had already discovered the people on the bank. But their speed was not as fast as Xianxia's. By the time they reacted, the river had already rushed over. Everyone's faces were ashen. Zuyun secretly said that something was wrong, but he couldn't just sit back and wait for death. If that was the case, then water incarnation. Zhu Yun's heart condensed, and he immediately formed a clone, and then the spiritual power in his body flowed, and the power of chaos suddenly poured into his body. Inspector Shui, I'm offended. He yanked hard and threw Xuesian away from the river bank, while he dodged towards the mayor. Thunder escape technique. His body turned into a bolt of lightning, and when he reappeared, he was already blocked between the town and the river bank. He originally wanted to hide it, but when he met the mayor, he found that their expressions were filled with joy from the bottom of their hearts. At this moment, Zhu Yun decided to save their lives. Suan Wu fist. With a low shout, Zhu Yun's fist used all the power of chaos, and the shadow of chaos turned into a huge tortoise shell, standing in front of him, just waiting for the water beast to attack. Run fast. Zhu Yun roared in shock, that was all he could do. Water is invisible, and this water has irreversible damage to those immortal officials, directly damaging their immortal roots, and may cause them to directly exhaust their lifespan and die. This water beast is not the body of a warcraft. It will definitely splash out after being blasted away. Zhu Yun is trying his best to deal with it, but he is unable to help them anymore. They can only rely on themselves. Blessings to the immortal. The mayor and others exclaimed, with worried looks on their faces. Come on, leave this to me. Zhu Yun roared again, and all the water beasts pounced on the giant basalt turtle transformed by the power of chaos. The water dispersed in all directions, and the yellow sand in it was like poisonous arrows, shooting out in all directions. Water incarnation. Zhu Yun had no time to care about the people behind him. With his thoughts in mind, the water incarnation that he had previously condensed had already taken flight. In the air, the rich water spiritual power was separated separately and quickly turned into a water column in the hands of the water incarnation. Call out. The water column rushed in front of Zhu Yun and suddenly turned into a flowing curtain of water. Those blazing yellow sands suddenly fell to the ground after being contaminated. Chi! 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 The yellow sand turned into black sand, and black smoke also came out. The mayor and others had retreated 100 steps away. They were all frightened when they saw the two immortal zoos joining forces to deal with it. The people of Qingping Immortal Kingdom have never seen such magical powers before. Wish Immortal is going to cause big trouble. The mayor murmured, and after the words fell, Xuesian had already rushed over, with a look of disbelief on his face and said, I am a foreigner in the immortal world, I wish the immortal master is a foreigner in the immortal world. She seemed to have just found out, and looking at her face, she was obviously frightened. Inspector Shui, the mayor seemed to have lost all his strength and said, Xianxia is indeed a foreigner from the immortal world. If you want to say it, then go ahead and say it. Xuesian was silent for a long time, staring blankly at Zhu Yun fighting with the huge waves of monsters that kept flying in the water. Although he is a foreigner from the immortal kingdom, he will risk his life to save us, the people of the immortal kingdom. I won't tell the inspector. The rest of the immortal officials are like mourning their heirs. They are people from the town, but Xuesian is the descendant of a noble family who was appointed by the immortal kingdom to gain experience. Although Xuesian has expressed his stance, who can guarantee this? You don't believe me? Seeing such a look, Xuesian frowned and shouted in a low voice. It's not that I don't believe it, but who can guarantee what the future will be like? The mayor shook his head and said, but Shan Peng took a step forward and said, Inspector Shui, if it weren't for Zhu Xianxi, all of us in Duxian town would be dead. So, if you don't say anything, we and Zhu Xian let's live a good life. You said, then we will die before Zhu Xianxi. Our Duxian town is nothing in the immortal kingdom. If a Duxian town is destroyed, it doesn't matter if we come to the immortal kingdom. Xuesian was silent for a long time, and then said, if the immortal kingdom didn't care, I wouldn't come here. Inspector Shui, don't say such nice things. There are tens of thousands of such towns in the Immortal Kingdom, and there is no less than one of us. Xianhao also said that he seemed to be facing an outsider at this moment. Xuesiyan bit his lip and said, there are indeed so many towns in the Immortal Kingdom, but what the Immortal Kingdom has to deal with is the entire foreign territory. Only by gathering the strength of the whole country can our Immortal Kingdom develop. The original Qingping, the Immortal Kingdom, is gone. We are all the remaining blood of the Qingping Immortal Kingdom. The Immortal Kingdom will not let any of its immortal people die for no reason. The mayor sighed and said, Inspector Xue, do you still remember what he said when he first came here 800 years ago and saw our immortal people collecting animal bones and collecting spiritual medicine for a living? Xuesiyan was stunned. Why don't they devote themselves to cultivating immortal roots? Even low-grade immortal roots can accomplish a lot. It's hard for Inspector Xue to remember. The mayor smiled calmly and said, if they go to practice, who of us will collect smoke soul powder and hand it over to the Immortal Kingdom patrol envoy? If they fail to hand it over, it will be a big crime. If they do, it will be a big crime. Well, we still have to have a surplus to exchange for purple light stones. Xuesiyan was silent. 800 years ago, she only left the royal city for the first time, so how could she understand the suffering of these ordinary small towns? It's too late to live any longer. Although we, the people of Qingping Immortal Kingdom, live for thousands of years, if we don't pay the smoke soul tax, we may die at any time. You were born in the Imperial City and are inextricably linked to the Imperial City. Even the patrol officer has to give you some face. But the mayor hesitated to speak. If he continued speaking, it would be a serious crime. Mayor, that was me before, not who I am now. Xuesiyan said, I wish the immortal to save the immortal people for the immortal country, just like us, the people of the immortal country. If you don't tell, I won't tell, no one will know that he is from outside the immortal country. Shanpeng then said, indeed, if you don't tell me, I won't tell you, but there's no guarantee. I wish Immortal she will tell it himself. Why would he say it himself? Xuesiyan was puzzled. Why do you think he said that? Shanhao pointed at Zuyun, who was still inseparable from the river water, and said, even you can see that Immortal Zhu uses the 5 elements of spiritual power to control spells, rather than us immortals using immortal power. Everyone in the Immortal Kingdom can see it. Xuesiyan shook his head and said, didn't you say that he has immortal roots? Then let him practice with these immortal roots, who can tell? Seasonal immortal roots? We just talked about it casually to reassure Immortal Zhu. How can outsiders in the immortal world have immortal roots? Xuesiyan also turned his head to look, pondered for a moment, and said, Immortal Zhu ran very fast before, not even as good as me, but he didn't find any spiritual power of the 5 elements. Maybe, I can make a fuss about it and hide it for a while. But what? Everyone didn't know much about the leg technique, but when they heard that Xuesi had any method, they all asked in unison. However, we also need to be honest with Immortal Zhu. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1276. Everyone made a decision, but suddenly no one spoke, they just looked towards Zuyun quietly. It seems that the battle between the giant beast in the river and Zuyun is equally matched. I wish the immortal will be strong. Shanpeng's eyes shone with envy. He was just a small immortal official in Duxian town. He had never seen such a scene. The most he could do was kill a monster. But warcraft is a taboo in their fairyland. Not to mention anything else, they just fell short of this courage. The fairy foreigner who came last time was extremely arrogant when he came in, and he ended up being the soul under my fan. Xianhao shook his head, remembering what happened 1,000 years ago. Shuexian said, the one last time, in terms of demeanor, is far from immortal Zhu. But I seem to remember that the other person said he was in the stage of becoming a god, and I don't know what realm this is outside of the fairyland. Inspector Shui, I don't even know who you are from the royal city, how can we know? Except for the mayor, everyone else was talking quietly. Until suddenly, the mayor's face darkened and he shouted, the situation has changed. Inspector Shui, go and talk to Zhu Xianxia. You are about to withdraw. Do not fight with the monsters. As soon as these words came out, the chatting immortals all shut up. Although they didn't understand why, the mayor was well informed and had been working in Duxian town for tens of thousands of years. He knew Duxian town very well. This is obviously another change happening in Duansien River. Shuexian still obeyed the mayor's order very much. Without any hesitation, he ran out with his legs glowing with light. She tried her best, but in the blink of an eye she rushed within 100 steps of Zuyun, shouting loudly, Zhu Xianxia, the mayor said there is something strange, evacuate quickly. How could Zuyun not want to get away? His Suanwu fist couldn't last long at all. If it weren't for the water curtain formed by the incarnation of water, he might have been contaminated by the river water. With a wry smile, he said, Inspector Shui, you leave first, I wish you will come back later. I'm afraid it won't work, Shuexian said seriously, getting a little closer, now that the mayor has spoken, it means that your life will be in danger later. If you don't leave, I'm afraid I won't be able to explain it. Look, is there anything I can do to help? This giant beast in the river must be inseparable from the water and cannot be chased. After hearing this, Zuyun began to think in his heart. If so, it seems feasible to lose this water incarnation and let the main body escape. The key is that there are a lot of spirit beads in this town, even an ordinary old man from the immortal people, so it is not a problem to get one or two of them. Inspector Shui, if I can escape, you leave first. Zhu will be here soon. Zuyun had an idea in his mind and immediately shouted that he planned to use the chaos palm and use the power of the palm to retreat backwards and escape. And Shuexian was close, so he was afraid of being affected. Seeing that Zuyun still asked her to leave first, Shuexian had no choice but to retreat, go back and tell the mayor what he said, and asked, Mayor, Zhu Xianxia can deal with it with ease, why? The mayor interrupted her unceremoniously and said, what Zhu Xianxia is fighting is just the magical power of the monster. These monsters use us people as playthings. Once its magical power cannot destroy people, I'm afraid the main body will come forward. Come on. You have low immortality and haven't felt anything yet, but I can already feel the demonic energy approaching. Shuexian was startled and looked towards the lower reaches of the river. Sure enough, a faint black shadow floated on the water. It's not fast, but it's terrifying. Is this monster so huge? Shuexian's voice trembled, but Xianhao and others could not see anything. Let's go first. Since Zhu Xianxia asked us to leave, he may be afraid that we will see his methods. The mayor sighed. They had to hide something from Shuexian before, but now it was no longer necessary. I hope Shuexian, who came from the royal city to train, will not reveal Zuyun's identity, otherwise they can only kill people and silence them. Although this may lead to criminal liability, it is still much lighter than concealing Zuyun's identity as a foreigner from the immortal world. Mayor, do you want me to carry you? Shuexian asked again. No need for the time being. Now that the bull demon group is gone, there won't be any movement later. I think there are only these two kinds of demon beasts in this beast wave. And the demon beasts will not leave too far from the water, so there is no danger. Everyone believed what the mayor said. Zuyun also started to prepare. With the idea of giving up the water incarnation, Zuyun no longer cared about it. Although this would damage his strength, It could at least save his life. He saw the opportunity and slapped a palm towards the huge wave. Chaos Palm. The gray-white palm force actually carried a little golden light on the outer edge, blasting towards the huge wave. At the same time, Zuyun also used the power of this palm to suddenly take a few steps back, escaping from the range of the huge waves, and then used the secret of immortality to chase the mayor and others. But the consciousness is in communication with the water incarnation. The scattered river water completely swallowed up all the water incarnations. Blessings to the immortal. Seeing that Zuyun had already caught up, everyone let out a sigh of relief and immediately came forward to greet him, all bowing their hands in salute. Let's go back to town first. Zuyun glanced back, and everyone quickened their pace and ran towards the town. No one spoke a word along the way. It wasn't until they entered the formation and felt the town protecting formation wrapping them up that they let out a long sigh of relief. I wish you the best, please forgive me. I concealed something before, but I had no choice but to do so. The mayor was the first to come and apologize to Zuyun. Then, the rest of the immortal officials did the same. Except Xianxia. Immortal Zhu, they are hiding it from me. Xianxia smiled bitterly, thought about it, and bowed to Zuyun. This was beyond Zuyun's expectations. He raised his eyebrows and changed his words, let's go to the town government first. The immortal officials also felt that it was not appropriate to talk about these topics in the town, after all, there were many immortals. And these immortals also needed to be kept secret. But while walking, Zuyun always looked back from time to time, because he could feel that the water incarnation did not seem to be dead. Broken immortal river. The water incarnation was swept into the river. But he was surprised to find that he was not affected at all. He could even use the water escape technique in the water to hide himself completely in the water. Until he saw a huge body slowly appearing from the downstream, and even swam past his body slowly. The water incarnation saw the full picture of the demon beast, which was clearer than the original body saw with the divine eye technique. He was already shocked in his heart. But it was not the size of the demon beast, but the endless demonic energy on it. This is a demon cultivator with more demonic energy than those seen in the mortal world or the spiritual world. What is the situation of this Jingping immortal kingdom? Town government. So, in addition to protecting the lives of the immortals in the town, your mission is to capture us, the foreigners from the immortal country. Zuyun looked solemn, looked at the mayor, and then looked at Xianxia, who came from the royal city. The immortal country has the imperial city and the royal city. The imperial city is the capital of the country, and the royal city is the fiefdom of some immortal kings. The immortal king and the immortal emperor have a close relationship, and it is not an exaggeration to say that they are wearing the same pants. And Xianxia came from the royal city to these border towns to train, and was led by the patrol envoy of this area. When her immortal roots are condensed and perfected, she can return to the royal city. Women like her usually end up marrying into the imperial city, making the relationship between the two cities closer. Master Zhu, Xianxia said with a wry smile, I am just here to experience the world, and I will just follow the mayor's orders. But every time the inspector comes to the town, he will call me to talk and ask about some things that happened in the town. I think this is why the mayor wants to hide it from me. After that, she looked at the mayor, who also looked embarrassed and said, Inspector Xue, you are from the royal city, and you don't know how hard it is for us to survive in these towns. It's not easy to get a foreigner from the fairyland, so of course we want to keep him to help our town. In return, we will also find a way to integrate him into our fairyland. In the country, so that he will not be discovered by the immortal king or the immortal emperor. Xianxia said, the immortal king and the immortal emperor are also reasonable people. The reason they issued this order is actually that they don't want the foreigners from the immortal kingdom to wreak havoc here. I think everyone has never forgotten Ye Yang's rebellion, right? That foreigner from the immortal kingdom took a hammer and hammered all the way into the imperial city. How many people from the immortal kingdom died under his hammer? So in order to avoid this situation, the immortal emperor and the immortal kings made this decision unanimously. All foreigners from the immortal kingdom must be forcibly sent to the imperial capital of the immortal kingdom. Zhu Yun's eyebrows jumped. Ye Yong's rebellion? With a hammer, it is no surprise that it is the real immortal king of the immortal realm. Immortal king. However, Ye Yong is a reasonable person, without any grudges or hatred. How could he make such a big fuss after coming to the Qingping immortal kingdom? Chuzhu was indeed bombarded by Ye Yong's hammer, because his Taoist companions and clansmen were bullied. Wang Jianshan also had some grudges against him, but Ye Yong smashed the chaos sword into the ground, which was considered to be a settlement. He was a man with his own principles. Unless this fairy land did something that angered the heavens and the people, Ye Yong should not do this. At this time, the mayor shook his head and took out a bead from his hand. Zhu Yun recognized that it was a golden spirit bead. Inspector Shui, I don't want to lie to you. In fact, you are still young and were born in the royal city close to the fairy emperor, so you will naturally speak from that perspective. But do you know where these Tongzu come from? Tongzu is the name of these spirit beads in Qingping fairyland. Zhu Yun did not speak. He also wanted to know where the spirit beads came from and why there were so many in Qingping fairyland. Isn't it said that there is a Tongzu mine in the imperial city? Shui Xian looked confused. The mayor laughed loudly and laughed until tears came out. Shui Xian was puzzled, Zhu Yun was puzzled, and even Shan Peng and others were puzzled. The 10 lies of Qingping immortal country, Tongzu is born in the mine. The mayor said, and then suddenly froze his expression, turned to look at Zhu Yun with a fierce face. Fellow Daoist Zhu, do you know that this is the golden spiritual pearl? The address of the immortal was changed to fellow Daoist. Tongzu was also changed to Lingzhu. Zhu Yun's heart moved, and said, the mayor, is he from the spiritual world? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1277. Spiritual world, spiritual world. The mayor sighed, looked at the confused immortal officials, and then looked at Zhu Yun. It doesn't count. Shui Xian finally came to his senses and frowned. Mayor, the spiritual world you are talking about, is it outside the fairy land? Good. The mayor simply admitted it and said, I am a person from outside the fairy land, and the outside world calls itself the spirit world. No, it's impossible. Shui Xian didn't believe it at all and said, you have immortal roots, which is completely different from the so-called people in the spiritual world. Secondly, although the mayor is nothing in the immortal kingdom, you were also appointed by the imperial city. If you were a foreigner from the immortal world, how could you survive until now? Wouldn't the inspector find out? The mayor said in a deep voice, people from the fairy land are extremely arrogant. Detective Shui, please don't underestimate the ability of us people from the spiritual world to survive. Zhu Yun also asked, Mayor, where in the spiritual world are you from, and what do you call him? And how did you appear to have immortal roots? The mayor was lost in memories, and everyone was already shocked beyond measure. After a long time, he got out of his memories and said, Friend Zhu, I am a sword cultivator from Wanpo Tian who comes from the East Mortal realm. Dongfanja, surnamed Wan, swordsman. The appearance of Wang Jianshan appeared in Zhu Yun's mind. But he didn't speak. Wan was lucky enough to enter Taoism with a sword, but what was even more fortunate was that he also entered Taoism with a sword and survived in this fairy land. He also found an opportunity to take away the mayor of this place. Of course, the mayor at that time was not a mayor. Chief, he is an immortal official who wants to kill Wan. After seizing the body, Wan came to know the uniqueness of this fairy kingdom, and even more about the difficulties and dangers involved in leaving. And the most important thing is that Wan's sword skills were unable to be used because of this fairy root. At this point, in order to survive for the rest of his life, Wan stayed in the Immortal Kingdom and applied to become the mayor of Duxian Town 10,000 years ago. Wan originally thought that the people of the Qingping fairyland were just like this in poor mountains and rivers. But after waiting for a long time, he discovered that the fairy people in the fairyland were just living under huge lies. Wan was not allowed to leave, so he had to get into it. On the day the secret realm of ascension to Immortal is opened, the golden spiritual power will open the entrance to the Immortal outer mountain, and monks will accidentally enter it. And these monks are the most populous Immortal outlanders in the Immortal Kingdom. And the Immortal Kingdom is always preparing to break out of the Immortal Kingdom and seize the spiritual world. Zuyun was greatly shocked, and the other Immortal officials, including Xuexian, were also frightened. Have they ever heard of such secrets? Don't doubt it, Wan Potion said, your predecessor was way by Immortal root. Do you know if this kind of Immortal root can hold any position in the Immortal Kingdom? Xuexian blurted out, historical records Immortal official. That's right, Wan Potion sneered, Wan remembers the history of the Immortal Kingdom very clearly. All the successive Immortal Emperors are trying to break this Immortal Kingdom. Otherwise, even if you practice to the extreme, you will still fail because of the imperfection of heaven in this Immortal Kingdom. And cannot ascend. Everyone was stunned. Isn't it that they practice to ascend to the Immortal world? But Wan Potion said that they could not ascend. Zuyun suddenly remembered the legend of Kunlun. Whether it was Kunlun or the secret realm of Xianxia, it was said to be a flying mountain outside the sky. Ye Yuan even told him that Kunlun is actually a world that flew down from the fairy world. What Wan Potion said can completely correspond to what Ye Yuan said. Moreover, there is also the legend of Ye Yang. Impossible, impossible, Xuexian's inherent thoughts were subverted. She shook her head and murmured, our ancestors have all ascended quite a lot, let alone those from the imperial city. Nothing is impossible, Wan Potion said with sharp eyes, it's just that you are all living in deception. And when a lie is passed down for generations, it is not a lie. Perhaps, when Inspector Shui returns home, he can ask the Immortal King. But that will also lead to Inspector Shui's death. Xuexian was silent for a moment, and then Zuyun also spoke. Senior Wan, if Zhu's guess is correct, are you the founder of the Wanjian Mountain sect? Wan Potion suddenly raised his head, unable to hide his joy. Fellow Taoist Zhu is also from the Eastern Mortal Realm. My Wanjian Mountain. Sorry, Wanjian Mountain no longer exists. Zuyun shook his head, and Wan Potion's expression suddenly froze, but then he smiled miserably, that's right, the mountain of Wanjian Mountain also comes from outside the sky, and there will always be a powerful person who knows the goods and will take him away. At that time, Ye Yang also said that someone would take it away, so he did not destroy the sword. Zuyun was stunned, and couldn't help but think of what Wan Potion said before. During the Ye Yang rebellion, Ye Yang also appeared here, so. I dare to ask Senior Wan, Zuyun said, Senior Ye Yang came to this fairy land for. Yes, Ye Yang was looking for me. But at that time, I was imprisoned in the imperial city, and he couldn't find me at all. You don't know how mysterious the fairy roots of this fairy country are. Coupled with the sun in the sky, the fairy emperor is even more mysterious. Ye Yang destroyed 13 royal cities and half of the imperial city, and finally had to leave. Then why doesn't Senior Wan leave? Logically speaking, you are now on the border, could it be that you cannot leave? That's right, you can't leave. You came from outside Kunlun, you should know the fog, right? The fog is like the water of the broken Immortal River. After being contaminated, it will invade the Immortal roots. If the Immortal roots are destroyed, lifespan will naturally be gone. Therefore, Wan can't go back and can only survive in Duxian Town. If Immortal Zhu hadn't come here this time, I'm afraid one would have regarded himself as a member of the immortal kingdom. After saying that, Wan Potion lowered his head and said nothing. Xianxia said, Mayor, you haven't told me how this Tongzo came from. Immediately, everyone cheered up again. Since he was once an immortal official in Shiji, he must be very clear about the origin of the Tongzo. I almost forgot to mention this. Wan Potion raised his head and showed a mysterious smile. I suggest you not to ask too clearly. As for fellow Taoist Zhu, I will speak with him. Shan Peng said loudly, Mayor, I have been with you for 3,000 years, and you still don't know who I am. Yes, Mayor, Shan Hao also said, I don't care about anything else. The fairyland is so far away and has nothing to do with me. I just want to live well. If I hadn't followed the mayor, I might have died 1500 years ago. Dead. The other immortal officials also expressed their stance in this way, obviously standing with him. Wan Potion looked at Xianxia. She gritted her teeth and said, Mayor, please tell me that although Xian is just a concubine of the immortal king's family, she is not that unbearable. Zuyun smiled and said, Senior Wan, let me tell you, I am not afraid of fighting all the way up from the East Mortal Realm. Well, you are worthy of being a monk from the Eastern Mortal Realm. Wan Potion laughed and said, this Tongzu, we in the spiritual world call it the Lingzu. It was originally a treasure raised by nature, but in this Jingping the immortal kingdom was made by the people of this imperial city. Those who refine pearls are called pearl refiners. Refined. Zuyun frowned and couldn't believe it. This is a treasure. Even the immortal emperor collected it and placed it in the Pearl Pavilion. His second batch of incarnations were also recondensed from those spirit beads. Yes, they were refined, Wan Potion sneered, they used our spiritual world monks to extract spiritual roots and condense them into beads. As soon as these words came out, Zuyun was stunned. Extract the spiritual root. Is this the immortal root of the immortal kingdom? Some would understood, right? All kinds of immortal roots emerge in endlessly. Among them are the immortal roots used to extract spiritual roots, which are called Yuling immortal roots. Those who possess these immortal roots can the immortal officials who have condensed the immortal roots, and the two of them work together, they are the enemy to restrain the monks. Regardless of how to condense the spirit beads, if these immortal officials appear in the spiritual world, you can imagine how the spiritual world will be devastated. Zuyun took a deep breath, feeling cold all over. This is extremely scary. If a monk has no spiritual roots, it is as if he is useless. Not all monks without spiritual roots are as stunning as Ye Yang, nor are they like Tang Tiangang who can enter the Tao through formations. Spiritual roots can be said to be the foundation for all the cultivators in Yellow Star to cultivate immortality. They are the foundation. And Wan Potion also said that the immortal kingdom is preparing to invade the spiritual world. Not only Zuyun, but also the immortal officials were shocked beyond measure. They know to some extent that spiritual roots are like their immortal roots. However, there are very few types of spiritual roots. In addition to the 5 basic types, there are also some mutated spiritual roots. But these are also derived from the 5 spiritual roots. That's a lot to say. Wan Potion seemed a little tired, waved his hand and said, Fellow Taoist Zhu, is there anything else you want to ask Wan? Before Zuyun could speak, he looked at Xianxia and other immortal officials again. What about you? What do you want to ask? Shan Peng spoke first, with a firm tone, anyway, I will follow the mayor. Whatever the mayor says will be whatever. The same goes for me, Shan Hao. Whoever dares to touch the mayor must kill me first. After saying that, he gathered his immortal roots, and the golden light fanned his bones, filled with murderous intent. The other immortal officials did not say anything, but walked to the mayor silently, intentionally or unintentionally standing between Xianxia and the mayor. Xianxia smiled bitterly and said, You don't have to look at me like this, maybe the mayor is right. We, the Queen of Immortals, are living under a huge lie. Zuyun ignored it, he was more concerned about another thing. Senior Wan, if I follow the original path, can I return to the spirit world? Wan Potion nodded and said, logically speaking, it's possible. But we have to wait until the Ascension secret realm is opened again. Zuyun thought for a moment and said, Senior Wan, if there is a chance, would you be willing to return to the spirit world with Zhu? The mayor's expression changed, and then he fell silent. After a moment, he faced the expectant eyes of the immortal officials and shook his head, I don't want to. Zuyun was a little surprised, but then he figured it out, what Senior Wan cares about is the swordsmanship that he can't practice. Yes and no. The mayor looked up and looked into the distance, I can get out, but what about them? I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzwan Xianxia. Chapter 1278. When Wan Potion said this, Zuyun already understood. During the 10,000 years in Qingping Immortal Kingdom, he had regarded himself as a member of the Immortal Kingdom and could not let go of the immortal people here. It is true that the fairy kingdom here is only the lowest level of existence. They are also the group of people who are enslaved by the fairy kingdom. But I have to say that Wan Potion's feeling for Zuyun seems to be different from the previous batch of people from Wanjian Mountain. It's no wonder that Ye Yonghui ran to this fairy land to save him after destroying Wanjian Mountain. Senior Wan, Zuyun said, you really don't want to leave. We can't live without each other, Wan Potion sighed and said, Wanjian Mountain has been destroyed, and my old friend has also gone. There is no one I know well in the spiritual world, so why should I go back? Zuyun thought thoughtfully and said, what if the Qingping Immortal Kingdom can be connected to the spiritual world without any barriers? Wan Potion laughed dumbly, how is that possible? The two were chatting, and nothing seemed to be a problem, but it frightened the other immortal officials, especially Xuesiyan. If this immortal country is connected to the spiritual world, wouldn't it fulfill the immortal emperor's wish? I heard Wan Potion say this before, so why did Zhu Xianji come up with this idea now? I wish you, fellow deist, really dare to think about something that even fellow deist ya can't do. Why do you think you can do it? Glancing at Zuyun and seeing that his expression was as usual, Wan Potion said again, it is true that fellow Taoist Zhu has boundless mystical abilities. Not only is the mysterious spiritual power palm technique Wan Mao unable to see through, but also the incarnation is boundless. It's comparable. But this fairy country, still has things you don't know about, and it's powerful enough. Zuyun shook his head and said, Senior Wan, not only are you unable to control the sword, but the sword's heart has been destroyed. No wonder it is like this. Wan Potion was stunned for a moment, then raised his eyebrows and said angrily, fellow Taoist Zhu, are you kidding me? Ha ha ha, Zuyun laughed in his own voice and said, a tiger falls in Pingyang and is bullied by a dog. Senior Wan, you are neither a tiger, but I, Zuyun, am not a dog either. If your sword heart is gone and your courage is gone, what's the matter, are you afraid that I, Zuyun, will break into this fairy land no matter what he wants? These words were spoken so sonorously and forcefully that all the people waiting were dumbfounded. How dare he, alone, be an enemy of the entire immortal kingdom? Zuyun said proudly, I have broken through the mortal world and the spiritual world, so why can't I break into this fairy land? Not to mention, the laws of the fairy land have collapsed and no one can ascend, but in the spiritual world, Zhu can see countless people have ascended. A trace of envy flashed in Wan Potion's eyes. Why didn't he want to ascend? But it is true as Zuyun said, without the heart of the sword, now this Lao Shiza's pen immortal root is restricted by the heavenly law of this fairy country, and the laws are incomplete, and he wants to ascend. If you can't even trigger the heavenly tribulation, how can you ascend? Is it possible that the immortal roots will be recognized by the heaven in the spiritual world and then help him overcome the disaster? Senior Wan, cultivation is against the will of heaven, and if you don't recognize the way of heaven, then we monks should let the heavenly people go. Regardless of the way of heaven in the spiritual world, it is still the way of heaven in Qingping Fairy Kingdom. As long as you can prove it, you can naturally ascend. Isn't it just that I don't have a sword in my hand, and I don't have a spiritual root in my body? Although I, Zuyun, am not a swordsman, I know a little bit about the sword. As long as I have a sword in my heart, I can use it as a sword. As soon as these words came out, Wan Poshan was shocked. How could such heroic words never come from his mouth? He has long since cultivated to the point where man and sword merge into one. The man is the sword is the man. There is no sword in the hand, but there is the sword in the heart. Even if he doesn't understand, he can understand it at a glance. For a moment, Wan Poshan was breathing rapidly, but he didn't know that Zuyun said this on purpose. The fairyland is so vast and the future is so uncertain. If there is no one to accompany you, it may be difficult for you to get through it alone. After all, Wan Poshan is also a swordsman in the same period as Ye Yang, which may allow him to gain unexpected gains. It would be nice if the Chaos Sword was here. Zuyun sighed slightly in his heart. He never thought that the Chaos Sword would follow Nujiao in the end. Otherwise, lending this sword to Wan Poshan would probably stimulate his fighting spirit, and the effect would be even better. I wish that my fellow Taoist is an extraordinary person. Although he is a junior, he is much better than me, an old man who has lived for more than 10,000 years. Wan Poshan was a human being in 2 lifetimes and couldn't help but smile bitterly. It's not too late for a prodigal to turn back. Although Senior Wan is not considered a prodigal, but now that he has more than enough life left, it is not too late to look back. Senior Ye, a person without spiritual roots can also achieve enlightenment and ascend. With talents like Senior Wan, what's wrong with an outstanding person who doesn't have spiritual roots? No matter what, just leave the immortal roots alone. I wish fellow Taoist Wan has learned what he said. A light flashed in Wan Poshan's eyes, and his aura changed a lot. He no longer looked like he was submissive, which made all the immortal officials extremely surprised. It turns out that their mayor is still the #1 figure in the spiritual world outside the fairyland. Xuesiyan stared even more. She had never seen this kind of momentum in her royal city. How could she, including those immortal officials, imagine that these monks from the spiritual world who came up from the mortal world came from the mountain of corpses and the sea of blood? It is not an exaggeration. In that case, Zuyun also frowned and said, Senior Wan, why don't you use your heart sword and go with me to meet the monsters in the Duanxian River? Zuyun vaguely felt that the magical beasts that made the immortals of Qingping Fairy Kingdom so fearful may be a point of breaking through this fairyland. Besides, he could still feel that the water incarnation was alive and well, but it was just that he was far away, unable to form a conscious connection. He was convinced that if he added another Wan Poshan, he might be able to kill the monster in the Duanxian River. Wish you, immortal, mayor, absolutely don't do it. When the immortal officials heard that the beast's color changed, they couldn't escape, but they didn't expect that these 2 people were crazy, and they actually dared to take the initiative to find the monster. Why not? Wan Poshan smiled arrogantly and said, think of me, Wan Poshan, when I was still a minor cultivator in Qi refining, I would talk eloquently, saying that one day I would break the sky with my sword. But I never thought that when I arrived in this fairyland, I would fall behind, take advantage. If it hadn't been for the encouragement from fellow Taoist Zhu, Wan might have lived like a joke. Now that I have regained my sword, I can defeat all kinds of magic with one sword. As he spoke, a golden light suddenly formed in his palm. The golden light turned into a shadow, but the sword intention surged, and there was a faint murderous aura, which shocked Zuyun. As expected of a person of the same generation as Ye Yang, this sword power is at his fingertips. Fortunately, I didn't teach Wan Poshan the way to draw talismans, otherwise in the future I would know that the dignified Wan Potion uses strokes to draw talisman, which would probably make people laugh out loud. Senior Wan, please. Zuyun laughed, stepped out of the townhouse, and walked towards the outside of the town. I wish you, fellow Taoist, that this footwork is indeed mysterious. What do you think of my 10,000 sword steps? Wan Potion's voice came from behind him, and with every step he took, there was a burst of sword energy. Walking to Zuyun's side, there were dozens of sword energy floating out of thin air behind Wan Potion. This sword energy is as solid as substance, and it seems that it can kill people at any time. Only the golden wolf hair in his hand seemed a little out of place. But Zuyun knew that this immortal root was an inevitable thing in the immortal kingdom. Just like the spiritual root of the Yellow Star Monk. But suddenly, an idea appeared in his mind. Since spiritual roots can be extracted and refined into spiritual beads, can immortal roots be used? If the immortal roots are also taken away, is it equivalent to a monk without spiritual roots? But he just thought about it and didn't dare to try. After all, Wan Po Tian's longevity now all comes from this immortal root. Once the immortal root is destroyed, Wan Potion may grow old in the blink of an eye and die on the spot. The most important point is that it is obvious that the power they use is not spiritual power. It seems to be the same power as immortal power. Zuyun once called his chaotic power pseudo-immortal power. Perhaps these are the real pseudo-immortal powers. Just as the two of them walked to the entrance of the village, they suddenly heard a cooing call from behind. They turned their heads and looked, but Xianxia came with long legs and half-body glowing with golden light. Mayor, Immortal Zhu, wait a moment. Xianxia panted slightly, obviously using all his strength to keep up. Inspector Shui, I have revealed my true identity. If you make friends with me again, I am afraid it will be inappropriate for you in the future. Wan Potion said seriously, counting the time, the inspector will be here soon. At this time in previous years, he would need to hand over the smoke soul powder in exchange for the purple light stone. At the same time, if there were people from the spirit world in the town, they would also need to hand it over. However, everyone in the fairyland knows that it only opens once every 1,000 years or so, and only then will outsiders enter. The mayor's words are serious. Xianxia took a breath and said, Shanpeng and the others also said they would go with the mayor. After the words fell, there were flashes of swords and shadows in the distance, and they were running towards them with all their strength. Wan Potion was stunned for a moment, then frowned and said, what does this mean? Xianxia smiled sweetly and said, since this immortal kingdom cannot ascend, then we should be willing to give it a try. Even if there is only one chance in 10 million, it is better than spending a lifetime here doing things for the immortal kingdom. Zuyun said, Inspector Shui thinks so too? Then, how do you explain it to Wang Cheng? Explain what? Xianxia said, the Shui family in the royal city asked me to come here for the purpose of training. But this training is hopeless, so why should I train? Zuyun and Wan Potion looked at each other and smiled. It's great to have help. Although they may not be of much help in killing the monsters in the river, they can still do errands on the side. At least, when the Duxian town works together and becomes a hemp rope, it can better deal with the disasters in this fairyland. Okay, come on then, so that you can see how graceful I, Wan Potion, was back then. Wan Potion was in high spirits, and Zuyun was smiling and silent. After a while, Shanpeng and others arrived. There's no need to rush, we can just go there slowly. It seems that there haven't been stories of monsters being killed in the fairyland for a long time. Wan Potion carries the memory of the original immortal official in historical records, and the most recent demonic beast was killed 30,000 years ago. If they in Duxian town can kill one of them, there will be unexpected benefits. He could return to the imperial capital and even take Zuyun there with him. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1279. Walking towards the Duanxian River again, the dozen or so people had completely different moods. Zuyun and Wan Potion walked at the front, and those behind them deliberately kept some distance. Fellow Taoist Zhu, if you provoke me, you might have some backup plan to stay in Duanxian River, right? And you are not sure about being alone, so you want me to come with you. After all, he is an old monster who has lived for tens of thousands of years. Wan Potion actually knows Zuyun's purpose very well. But Zuyun didn't hide it, and said with a smile, "What state has Senior Wan reached before? It's not high, it's just the Mahayana stage. But I tried my best, but Ye Yang didn't dare to take the hammer hard." There was a lot of pride in his words. Zuyun certainly believed that sword cultivators had such strength. The junior used an avatar to stay there during the god transformation stage. I think the seniors also noticed it. However, since the avatar is not dead, maybe we can go into the river to find out. Zuyun also told the truth that it was the first time for the two of them to cooperate and they needed to know the basics. Wan Potion frowned and said, "I haven't tested whether the water from the Duanxian River has any effect on the monks in the spiritual world, but can your incarnation hide it from the monsters in the river?" "Why not?" Zuyun said with a confident smile, "My incarnation can use the water escape technique to dive into the water and merge with the water. Besides, the water is full of yellow sand. If you dive into it, even the monsters can't find it." Wan Potion's face turned cold and he said in a deep voice, "Friend Zudeo, you are absolutely wrong. Perhaps, that monster is using your incarnation as bait to lure me over. What's going on?" Zuyun obviously didn't believe it. His water escape technique might not even be discovered during the tribulation period, let alone a magical beast. But perhaps before the words were spoken, his expression also changed. "The yellow sand in the Duanxian River has exposed flaws in your avatar. If my guess is correct, even if you approach the river, your avatar cannot communicate with you. This magical beast from Qingping Fairy Kingdom seems to be from outside the territory. The descendants of the demon have unknown methods." Zhu Yunqiang calmed down. He knew what Wan Potion was referring to. Not to mention what the magical beast was capable of. Even though the incarnation was integrated with water, it was still not water after all. Similar to Zuyun using the invisibility charm in the water, the yellow sand will make the invisible water incarnation reveal its original shape. It's just an incarnation, no problem. Zuyun is also open-minded. As long as there are spiritual beads, he can have as many incarnations as he wants. By the way, Senior Wan, do you still have the spirit beads with you? Lingzhu? I can't use it, but they do have some. What do you want the spirit beads for? Spirit beads are considered a treasure in the spiritual world, but generally speaking, not many monks can use them. In addition to the limitations of spiritual roots, it also requires extremely suitable spells or chi refining methods. It's useful." Zuyun stopped, waiting for Xuexian and others to come up, and said, "Do you have those tongzhu? Wish the immortal a tongzhu? I have a water tongzhu." Shanpeng took out a water blue bead without hesitation, which was the water spirit bead. "I have fire beads." Shanhao also took it out directly. The rest of the immortal officials actually carried one with them. They explained that sometimes when some immortals collected smoke soul powder, they would just exchange it for the tongzhu. Sometimes the patrol envoys would also bring tongzhu in case there was not enough purple light stone. Zuyun suddenly had more than a dozen beads of various colors, including gold, wood, water, fire, and earth. Xuexian finally took out a bead and said with a smile, "Master Zhu, this bead of mine is different. See if you can use it." "What's the difference?" They're all beads. Zuyun smiled and stretched out his hand, only to see that in Xuexian's hand was a light blue wind spirit bead. He couldn't help but be surprised when he saw Xuexian smiled and said, "Can Immortal Zhu use it? Just take it if you can." Zuyun pondered for a moment and said, "It can be used, but I didn't expect that if it is used properly, it might have miraculous effects." Wan Potion glanced at it and said, "Is it possible that fellow Taoist Zhu can control the wind spirit power?" Zuyun grinned and said, "What do you think?" "I'm too lazy to guess." Wan Potion did as he said, and continued walking towards Duanxian River, saying, "In the spiritual world, the one with the strongest wind spirit power is the Jiangufeng family. It's a pity. Their wind spirit power is actually used to blow the furnace fire for making swords, which is a waste of natural resources." As he said this, he couldn't help but sigh. Zuyun smiled and said, "But at any rate, I have used the wind spirit power to a great extent, right?" Wan Potion thought for a moment and said, "The wind is colorless and invisible. If it is used in the way of swordsmanship, it would be good. If my fellow Taoist knows how to use spiritual power, how about filling this wind spirit bead with spiritual power? Apart from anything else, the spiritual power of the immortal kingdom is very abundant, and even the 10 spiritual realms cannot match this place. Let it go first. Since the monster doesn't dare to come ashore, we have plenty of time. Let's explore the way before we come this time." Zuyun was not polite, and specially stuffed the Fengling pearl into his arms, and stuffed the rest of the beads into the ring. At this time, only 1 mile away from the Duanxian River, Wan Potion said, "You guys wait here, fellow Daoist Zhu, and I will go over and take a look." The Duanxian River is calm as always. If it weren't for the fact that there were traces on the ground that Zuyun and Shui Incarnation had fought with the monster Shui Lang, no one would have believed that a monster had appeared here. "Can you feel the Avatar's presence?" Walking half a mile away, Wan Potion suddenly asked. "I can feel it. I guess Senior Wan's guess is right. I can't form a conscious communication with the Incarnation." "That's it? This monster has extraordinary intelligence. From what I can see, it should have lived for tens of thousands of years." "Tens of thousands of years?" Zuyun squinted his eyes and said, "Senior Wan, with your memory in the Shiji Immortal official, do you know how long the Immortal Kingdom has existed?" "The history of the Immortal Kingdom begins with flying into the outer world. It seems to be hundreds of thousands of years ago." "So long?" Zuyun couldn't help but marvel. "Yes, it has been so long, but I don't know whether the historical records are accurate about things that happened long ago. But what we do know is that the original fairyland was located in a place called Qingping Star. Due to the influence of the extraterrestrial demon, the attack shattered the world, and the last fragment flew to the spiritual world." Zuyun was silent for a moment and said, "The place where the spirit world is located is called Yellow Star." "Huangxingxing? Qingpingxing?" Wan Potion frowned and said, "What kind of explanation is this? Could it be the stars in the sky?" He raised his head to look at the sky, but he could only see thousands of golden rays, and the sun was shining through the gaps in the duckweed. "I don't know if they are stars in the sky. But there are stars in the fairy world. A star is a world. So it is called a world star." Speaking of this, Zuyun suddenly had a flash of inspiration in his mind. This time he was lucky enough to be caught by him. He remembered that the world stars were also graded, distinguished by the black and yellow colors of heaven and earth. Yellow stars are yellow level stars, which can be said to be the lowest level of world stars. At first, he didn't know this concept. But at this time, in the fairyland, there is obviously spiritual power, but no one is cultivating it. The immortals here have immortal roots. There are many types of immortal roots, and they even cultivate the pseudo-immortal power in the air. Does that mean that Qingpingxing's level is higher than that of Huangpingxing? What's on your mind? Wan Potion noticed that Zuyun was suddenly silent, so he turned around and saw his frown. I'm thinking that Qingpingxing may be more advanced than Huangxingxing, so they can extract our spiritual roots and condense them into spiritual beads. Advanced. Wan Potion murmured, and suddenly a golden light appeared in his hand. The golden wolf hair reappeared. After watching quietly for a moment, the golden light dissipated again. I understand, you are right. Before Zuyun could speak, Wan Potion said again, I practice swordsmanship, which is not based on spiritual power, and is not affected by spiritual roots. Therefore, I can use the sword root to condense the immortal power here, and then it's no wonder that I can condense sword energy into something so smooth without a sword in my hand. I'm still wondering, when did I, Wan Potion, become so talented? Zuyun suddenly smiled and said, does this count as Senior Wan's good luck? Ha ha ha, I have always had good luck. When I was able to rule the mortal world, I also picked up a fairy sword. Later, although I had a duel with Ye Yang and lost completely, it also aroused my competitive spirit and pursued him all the way. He entered the spiritual world. However, he was unlucky in the end and entered the Qingping Fairy Kingdom by mistake, and he never came out. You should change your position and think about it. Senior Wan, is it the greatest luck that you are still alive and can practice swords again? Wan Potion stopped laughing and looked at Zuyun, should I say that the greatest luck is meeting you? Zuyun's face turned red, he was seen through, and he quickly changed the subject and said, so, in the historical records, is there any record of what the extraterrestrial demon is? That's not true, Wan Potion stopped teasing Zuyun and said, in short, what is certain is that this monster is not an extraterrestrial demon, but has the blood of an extraterrestrial demon. Otherwise, how could the Qingping Fairy Kingdom survive? Zuyun also agreed with this statement. There was still a shocking thought in his mind that he hadn't spoken out yet. Could the so-called extraterrestrial demons be related to the demon clan? When Shen Jingzhu looked over earlier, he saw the lingering black shadow, which had some similarities with the aura of the demon cultivator in the mortal world and the spiritual world. But after all, the magic skills of demon cultivators have been modified, and there will naturally be differences after practicing them. So, did this monster also change in order to adapt to the pseudo-immortal power of Qingping Immortal Kingdom? Otherwise, even if 100,000 years pass, they will not be able to survive here safely. In this case, it is also said that they have the possibility of killing this immortal river-breaking beast. Senior Wan, I'll try to go to the river, and you'll be waiting for the opportunity on the bank at any time. Boy Zuyun, Wan Potion's eyes flashed and he said, be careful in everything. He didn't hold back, because after talking to him, he naturally understood. Now that it's here, let's find a way to kill that monster. Zuyun smiled indifferently, and the chaos power in his body rapidly changed and changed. The Chaos Lotus turned all the chaos power into water spiritual power. Water escape technique. He gave a low drink and his whole body escaped into the water. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzhuan Xianxia. Chapter 1280. As soon as he entered the water, Zuyun felt that the demonic energy in the water was extremely thick. Just like the spiritual power in the air on land. No wonder this monster is so huge. Thinking of the dark shadow he saw with the divine eye technique, Zuyun was still frightened today. But if you want to leave Qingping Fairy Kingdom calmly, killing this monster is the first step. If he was the only one, he would definitely not dare to think about it. Fortunately, Wan Potion's sword heart was aroused, and he at least got one more helper. With Xuexian's help, he might at least be able to go to the royal city and find out more about the Qingping Immortal Kingdom. By the way, Xiaohuo seems to be from the Qingping Fairy Kingdom as well. I don't know how much he knows about this fairy country. Zuyun suddenly remembered, but it was a pity that he was already in the Duanxian River at this time, Otherwise he would really have to be called out to ask. The yellow sand flowing in the river was gradually blocked by Zuyun's body. In just a moment, Zuyun noticed a strange force sweeping across his body. It should be the demonic consciousness of the demonic beast. Maybe he will come over soon, but I don't know where my water incarnation is still. Zuyun could indeed feel the presence of the water incarnation, but he still couldn't sense the specific location in the water. There is no movement in the water. I think the monster is waiting for an opportunity to move. You can find my position through the yellow sand, but I can't find you through the water flow. Feeling the flow in the water, whether it was direction or speed, there were some changes. Zuyun also increased his vigilance and began to feel attentively. In the back. He melted into the water without moving, so he could naturally feel various changes. This monster seemed to have quite a plan. His eyes were focused, pretending not to notice, but he was very energetic. I just hope one potion has been prepared. If the attack misses and the monster tries to escape, it will never have a chance again. The monster is also extremely careful. Even though it is very capable of sneaking in the water, it tries its best to contain its aura and completely contain it within the demonic energy in the water. But he didn't know that Zuyun had discovered his existence. Finally, the monster was very close to Zuyun, and slowly opened its mouth, revealing its sharp fangs. The yellow sand was stirred and began to become disorderly. Although Zuyun couldn't see what was going on, he knew that the magical beast was about to start. When the churning speed of the yellow sand slows down even faster, he should run away, and then pretend to be panicked and run away. Sure enough, the yellow sand that was slowly being stirred up suddenly changed speed. Zuyun's heart condensed, and he immediately used the water escape technique to escape 10 steps away. He turned around and saw a huge strange mouth that just happened to bite the air. At the same time, a pair of scarlet eyes like copper bells stared at him. Run! Zuyun had no time to be afraid. Seeing the face of this giant beast with his own eyes was far more terrifying than what he had seen with his divine eye technique. If this was a real extraterrestrial demon, it would probably be even more terrifying. The monster's mouth failed, but it found that Zuyun had not escaped, but opened his mouth again, and suddenly rushed towards Zuyun, as fast as lightning. But it underestimated Zuyun. Under the water escape technique, he does not judge by what he sees with his eyesight, but by the changes in the water flow. When he opened his mouth, Zuyun had already escaped. When he closed his mouth again, he still had a mouthful of sand. Roar! The demonic beast was teased, and the crimson in his eyes turned into anger, which then took over his reason and turned into a hunting instinct. Zuyun sneered in his heart, but he did not dare to relax at all. He continued several water escape techniques and escaped deep into the water. The monsters chased after Zuyun. Underwater undercurrents surged, and the surface of the Duanxian River stirred up turbulent waves. The old god Wan potion was there, but Xuexian and the others were frightened. Not only will their fairy roots be poisoned if they touch the river water, but also depending on the solidity of the huge waves, they may be beaten to death. We immortal people are really not as determined as the people outside the immortal world. No wonder it is difficult to become immortal. But only a moment later, Xuexian's eyes became firm, as if he was talking to himself or to the other immortal officials. Shan Peng's face turned pale and his voice was trembling, but he said firmly, "No. Don't leave, I wish all the immortals are still in the river." "That's right, if I don't leave, I definitely won't leave." Shan Hao said this, and the other immortals naturally expressed their opinions one by one. After all, they were still a certain distance away from the river, and neither Wan Potion nor Zuyun had brought them here in the first place. "Let's take a look, maybe we can really help." Xuexian glanced at the people behind him and sighed secretly. His immortal roots might be able to help, but it was too difficult for these immortals and low-grade immortal roots. The grade of the immortal root also represents the speed and talent of cultivation. How can it be so simple? At this time, a figure suddenly rushed out of the water, causing a splash of water. The water splashed everywhere, and there was more yellow sand. Senior Wan, hurry up. It was Zuyun. After several escape maneuvers under the water, Zuyun finally returned to the original escape position after twists and turns. The advantage of doing this is that he is closer to Wan Potion and he will take action faster. I'm here. Wan Potion roared, golden light flashed in his hand, and the sword energy condensed from pseudo-immortal power was already ready to go. At this moment, a giant pillar arched out of the water, and the pillar soared into the sky, and then broke open, revealing the body of the monster with its bloody mouth open. Horns, teeth, skin, scales. No matter which one it is, it's all a weird black color. Chi. Before the sword energy arrived, billowing white smoke came out of the monster. It turned out to be the sunshine of Qingping Fairy Kingdom, shining on the monster and burning it. Roar! 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 The monster was in pain, let out a miserable wail, and tried to get back into the water by forcefully controlling its body. But he never expected that the golden light that breaks through the sky has arrived. Wanjian Chaozong. Following Wan Potion's angry shout, the sword energy golden light was released again. The brightness was far more dazzling than the sunlight, and before the monster returned to the broken immortal river, it plunged in hard. Call out! Call out! Call out! Countless sword energy and golden light shined. Zuyunluo landed on the shore, and he was extremely frightened. Wan Potion's strength was not as strong as in the Mahayana period, but it was beyond the original strength of this body. Among the immortal officials in Duxian town, Zuyun could tell by his aura that he was in the stage of becoming a god. But at this time, Zuyun felt that Wan Potion had at least shown his strength in the integration stage. He had fought against the Liangsu period before, so he naturally knew a rough idea. Sword Cultivator is indeed terrifying. Before he had time to sigh, the monster was riddled with holes by the sword energy. When it landed on the water, it was already lifeless and dying. But Zuyun knew that apart from the sunshine, Wan Potion's sword energy also accounted for most of the credit. Go over and have a look. Zuyun turned around and walked away on the waves. The monster was as tall as a 10-story building, but Zuyun grabbed the monster's forehead and suddenly dragged it to the shore. But inevitably, the body of the monster will be exposed to sunlight, and black smoke will appear again. Even monsters are afraid of the sunshine. Fortunately, I didn't try it. Zuyun raised his head slightly, a little intimidated, but he had never known Wan Potion or other immortal officials about how strong these sunlights were. Fortunately, he had not been contaminated by them. Senior Wan, this swordsmanship is really powerful. After completely dragging the monster's body to the shore, Zuyun couldn't help but praise him. Wan Potion panted a little, shook his head, and said after a while, I'm old, I haven't used this swordsmanship for a long time, and I am also rusty. Senior Wan is really too modest. It's taken you 10,000 years. However, after this time, I think Senior Wan's sword skills will become more and more proficient. Boy Zuyun, if you want me to go with you, just say so. There is no need to use these methods. Zuyun's thoughts were guessed. He touched his head, and then said seriously, Senior Wan, look at this monster, do you recognize it? I don't recognize it. Wan Potion simply shook his head and said, although there are killings of Warcraft in the Immortal Kingdom, generally speaking, Warcraft will be dismantled by them. At most, the appearance of the Warcraft will be reported, but the harvest will be hidden. Zuyun pondered for a moment and said, it seems that this monster is also full of treasures. It should be like a person in the spirit world. After hunting a powerful monster, he will take some of the skin, bones and blood as materials for refining weapons. Yes, The national staff of the Immortal Kingdom is said to be made from the spine of a demon dragon. Dragon. Zuyun was shocked and said, is the demon dragon a demonized real dragon, or is it? I don't know. Wan Potion pointed at his temple and said, historical immortal officials, their memories mostly come from historical records, but they are not what I have seen with my own eyes. I have only seen them in books. Pass. At this time, Xuexian quietly appeared behind the two of them and said softly, the staff of the fairy kingdom is made from the backbone of a real dragon and soaked in the demonic blood of demonic beasts for thousands of years. You know. Zuyun and Wan Potion suddenly turned their heads and asked in unison. In our royal city, this is something everyone knows. The reason why it is soaked in demon blood is to better deal with monsters. Xuexian knew that after the Immortal Kingdom could not ascend, his attitude towards the Immortal Kingdom also changed slightly. Of course, this is not a big secret, and everyone with some status knows it. Zuyun shook his head to express disbelief and said, is there a possibility that this is just a statement for ordinary people? After all, it is called the National Staff, and presumably it is also the staff of the Immortal Emperor. It is not that simple. Xuexian spread his hands and said, I don't know about the other things, but the fact of being soaked in demon blood is real. Zuyun understood and nodded, we will bring this matter up later. We need to see how to deal with this monster first. Also, the fact that the broken immortal river poisons people's immortal roots is related to this monster. Wan Potion laughed, his face suddenly turned cold, and said, find the prisoners detained in Duxian town and test them. Shan Peng stood up and said, Mayor, these prisoners have been reported to the police. If they die due to their immortal roots being destroyed, I'm afraid they won't be able to explain to the inspector. Wan Potion suddenly fell silent. Anyone who committed a crime must report it to the Immortal Kingdom for processing. Although the information back and forth was a bit slow, it was a rule that had to be followed. How about I give it a try? Shan Hao stood up at this time.